To start our superintendent report this evening, we want to highlight for folks the newly proposed high school block schedule that we've been talking about for some time. As you know, there's been a high school visioning group that's been in place probably for close to 5 years now that has been looking at how to best create an environment that matches what the world of work is, the world that the students are going into. And that incorporates a lot of project-based learning, a lot of collaborative work. We've designed our media center at the high school and at the middle school around based learning, small group learning. And classroom instruction is taking on more of a project-centered approach. And as we look at the high school schedule, we also are moving in that direction of how do we best accentuate that type of instruction. Again, parallel to our strategic plan that we have until 2025. The high school schedule allows for greater blocks of time, which become very advantageous to where you have projects, where you have labs, where you're doing cross-curricular connections. So you're going to hear a lot about some of the positives about moving to more of a block schedule, optimizing more instructional time, less travel time in the hallways, less downtime, so to speak, as kids traverse from here and there and throughout their schedule. There were a number of schedules that have been looked at over the past couple of years as the committee has explored scheduling mechanisms. What you're going to see tonight is patterned closely to kind of what Lake Orion has used now successfully for the past few years in terms of skinny blocks and larger blocks. The Oxford alternate 8 schedule is similar in regards to this too. So I know the committee at the high school has spent a lot of time researching, visiting schools, looking at schedules, and trying to pair that with what best meets our needs. Again, the sole purpose of best preparing our students for that world of work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wilson and staff for kind of bringing us into this proposal. It is not to be approved tonight, so that it is not up for approval. This is simply for information. There are going to be parent forums where this will be presented to parents for discussion, for input. So those parent forums, all of that will occur before the approval of this comes. So this is really just for informational purposes tonight. This is not, again, for approval. So, Mr. Wilson, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of get us started with acquainting us with this new scheduling mechanism.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Schwartz. As Dr. Schwartz says, we've spent a long time with a visioning team that has changed a lot. Moving into last year, we had a group of about 17 individuals that included Rita Davis from the board. Ms. Brault came a couple of times. We had a student representative, and we had 16 teachers that were serving on this committee with us as we wrestled every week through how we wanted to develop this schedule. We started off with a needs assessment of where we were at, how we were building curriculum in the building, what our students actually needed from academics to social emotional to opportunities for experiential learning to occur, all in line with what we've been talking about for visioning for years. Dr. Schwartz did a really great job of kind of painting the whole picture for us. So I'm not going to spend too much time saying that, as I do have staff members that are here to talk about the various steps through this. And then I'll wrap it up at the end. So at that point, if there's no questions to begin with, we'll let them start.
All right.
Don't stand there.
I just want to make sure that everybody hopefully has a better picture. Seeing that I am a photography teacher, and I think if my students were taking that, those photos, and we'd be a little disappointed. My name is Chris Conklin. I teach photography and digital art, as well as some other art classes over at the high school. And I know it's not a surprise that an art teacher would be standing up here trying to tell you the real benefits of a block schedule. Having 90 minutes with kids really allows them to dive into that experience and work through problems in one setting a little bit more. They get that it's not start, stop, start, stop. It's start, maybe I run into a problem. I can look at what somebody else is doing and still have time to actually come back to my problem, as opposed to the traditional method of doing things. But I don't just think that it's beneficial to us art teachers and science teachers who do labs and all that. The other day, just in the hallway, I saw one of our social studies teachers setting up a basic trade route through the building, and it ended up taking him 2 days to do it. So that way the kids can get through all the experiences. But even he said it'd be really cool if I could do this all in one day and really set forth that discussion a little bit more. So we really do try and focus on those experiences where kids are in there actually doing, as opposed to just sitting and kind of doing the rote work. And really also have a chance to discuss with their classmates and come to deeper conclusions that way. Which really, like it says here, creates that environment that provides, the multiple ways for students to learn, as opposed to just, here's one way, let's do it, let's get it done. We do feel we have a schedule that you guys have already seen that kind of fits that, and to kind of get us a little bit further down that method, Jen Smoleski is actually going to come and
musical chairs. So this is one sample of a schedule. It's what the team came up with to propose for next year. Couple things we want to highlight from this. Monday is what you would call a skinny day. All classes would meet and the same kind of bell schedule as they do now. The purpose of going with that instead of an alternate AB is a consistency for the students, but also to guarantee 3 touch points with every student between their teachers and them. It also helps maintain a standard of connection for our special needs populations, our English language learners, and to make sure that they do have 3 touch points every single week instead of an alternate schedule, which would have only provided them with 2. You can see the yellow jacket time nested midday on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is about an hour and a half, 90-minute block, just like the classes, to allow for lots of things. One of the things we're most excited about is getting all the stuff that currently replaces instruction in the classroom, a dedicated space to happen so we can protect instructional time. Creates more opportunities if you look at the 6th and 7th periods at the end of the day for students who are seeking outside internships and hands-on employment opportunities to kind of test career fields for themselves and gain experience, because those blocks start earlier than a traditional 7th-hour schedule. They would be able to leave the building and get to that place of employment earlier. So here, obviously there would be an impact on the middle school and on GATE because many of their students do travel to the high school for classes. This is one idea the team came up with to help navigate that. It is just an idea. Students could have the option of taking 2 classes at the high school that would meet first block of the day. That could include several of our math classes, German, band, biology, and chemistry for our GATE students in particular. Additional courses could be added for those students as needed. Some of the ones included web design, digital technology, computer programming, intro to engineering, and applied technology. So it will open up more opportunities for more students. And those enrollments and the processes for that obviously would still have to be determined in partnership with the middle school and Gate.
Could you only take one then? Because my son's got German at the high school. Now he's in 8th grade, but I mean, he might be interested in,
If German was a first period class and there was something offered second period, he could have started the day at the building every day, just as he does now, but taken 2 classes.
right. But if he just takes one, then he's just showing up on Tuesday,
Yes.
Thursday. Okay.
And Monday.
Yeah.
And Monday, yeah.
Yeah, and Monday. Yeah, correct.
So why consider Yellow Jacket time? That's probably the newest part to anyone of the schedule because most of us are familiar with what a block schedule looks like. The research supports it. A strong advisory program builds strong relationships within a school building and makes the learning community more successful. The social emotional development impacts student learning. Being able to provide a space for students to grow, build relationships, and work through things and explore things is key to this time. Effective advisory programs support academics. They don't take away from them simply because there is time allotted to them. The students under this plan would travel together for all 4 years with the same lead teacher and build a strong learning cohort together.
What do you mean by a lead teacher? That's, oh, Yellow Jacket time. Sorry.
So some other reasons to consider Yellow Jacket time. We want to talk about the non-academic needs first. A sense of belonging and support really helps students throughout their high school experience. They develop that sense of belonging. They are part of a community. They have a voice that they might not have in a traditional academic classroom. Their social and emotional development requires opportunities such as clubs and student groups that right now many students cannot fit into an after-school schedule, either because of after-school jobs, transportation, a myriad of things. Being able to do some of these activities during Yellow Jacket time opens up more doors for them and more experiences. Our educational development plan or EDP requirements are time-consuming and required. They are an essential part of what we need to do. Being able to channel them into a structured time would help heighten in the students' awareness and in their eyes the level of importance these carry and help us place a better value on them than taking time out of core academic classes to meet those needs.
Question.
Yes.
During, and you may have addressed this and I was like half listening. So forgive me. But during the Yellow Jacket time, you said that these students would stay together, the same group of students starting. Okay, so they're going to be together with the same teacher. And that's to develop relationships, you said? Okay, just clarification for me.
Yes, the goal would be to build very strong cohorts.
Okay. Just, I remember once before when they did something like that, the students they became really close. They did, but they worked against the teachers. Hopefully that won't happen this time.
So the academic needs of students also have increased. And these are needs we could use Yellow Jacket time to meet. That is part of the plan. In many cases, interventions are crucial to meeting student needs. Coming out of a pandemic, there are even more academic needs than we are accustomed to dealing with. Students sometimes just can't seek assistance after school from teachers or from our National Honor Society tutors. Being able to do that during the school day with them and for them would really help them feel supported academically and create the space for them to be successful. It would also preserve instructional time for learning and assessing by creating a structured, scheduled place for non-academic things to take place. And we're going to talk more about that later. Can also provide an additional space for those aha moments for clubs and extensions of the classroom to do activities We have a wilderness survival class for a student who maybe isn't enrolled in the class to do an activity and kind of test it out to see if it's something they want to enroll in. To do those kinds of things without just jumping in kind of, I don't even know what that class is. Do I want to sign up for it? So to gain more experiences and make choices about things that interest them in their learning going forward. It will help create a culture of continuous learning and improvement within the classroom and within the structured time. There are a lot of regular, frequent events that take place. Is this you? Let me introduce Jackie Chavez. She is one of our guidance counselors.
So I will be talking about just making the most of our 90 minutes on Yellow Jacket time. So one of the things that Ms. Mileski touched on was focusing on social emotional support. We've, as a counselor, I've seen an increase, and the whole building has seen an increase on students needing social emotional support, and this will allow for one, the student to build a relationship with the cohort that they have, but also for us to give them activities and resources to obtain a larger toolbox of how to handle those situations, and give them more resources on just that aspect. Another thing is, like Ms. Mileski said, the EDPs take a lot of time, and we can use the Yellow Jacket time to allow for our students to complete those EDPs, those NWEA testing, leadership activities in that 90 minutes without going towards our classroom instruction time that's important for the student to learn. And the last thing on this is college visits and career visits. A lot of the times, so we schedule the visits, but it's during the school, the students' instruction hour. And so we can use the Yellow Jacket time to encourage more students to attend these college and career visits and explore more post-secondary options without having them miss instruction time again, and network and that sort of thing. So, so we can also use this 90-minute time for special events, like we're thinking of doing 1 or 2 times a year a student organization fair, where we can have the student in the clubs and sports or any other activities that students will be interested in, that they have that time to explore more activities and clubs and sports where they can engage and interact with other student organizations. Another thing is having a job and internship fair during this time. This way students can look at more post-secondary options and network with these career people coming in and just talking with them, asking questions and that sort of thing. The next one is, so last week we had homecoming week, and this would have been a perfect time to use Yellow Jacket time so that we didn't have to minimize our classroom time, but they could have used the assemblies during, or they could use Yellow Jacket time to have the assemblies and not go into minimizing our instructional time with the kids. Oh, you know. This evening. And now Ms. Mileski will go back up here and
So the structure of Yellow Jacket time, dedicating 2 90-minute blocks is a lot of time. And we kind of want to go through just a little bit of how we would propose that works. There would be 4 Yellow Jacket time coordinators, 1 for each grade level, to ensure the teachers were provided the materials and resources that they needed in order to do this effectively, to kind of eliminate any potential problems that might arise. It also would entail looking ahead, planning and saying, this is when we're doing our NWA testing. This is when we're doing our EDP plans, and building those calendars and those schedules well in advance so everyone knows what is going on and how to go about that. That team has already started looking at next year and gathering data of all the things that we would like to put in there so that we can, if approved, be ready to put things in place rather than scrambling in the spring and over the summer to put it together. There are so many things that could be done in this time that prioritizing them is going to be probably the next challenge once we have everything identified. The guidance and support would be provided for all teacher-led activities by the coordinators, by guidance counselors, by administration. When not leading their cohort, teachers would be actively engaged in doing other things. So there is no, they're always with their kids. That's where the community, the relationship, that cohort builds comes in. There are opportunities to practice with the block schedule this year, woven in to let our teachers have that experience, let our students have that experience, to see how it is for those who have not done it before, to run a 90-minute class period and have engaging experiential learning opportunities each time. And now, Mr. Wilson,
I think that's me to close it up.
this is you.
Question before we move off of Yellow Jacket time. So we had academic center and the feedback that we were receiving was that that was not of a value add. So that eventually went away. And now this sounds like academic center on steroids. Can you help draw that distinction for me of how we're, you know, it feels like we're kind of going back to that now after we received feedback that that wasn't a value.
Yeah, so academic center, was kind of prevalent the last couple of years, I should say the first couple of years that I stepped into being here. And it was very much focused on homework completion. So there was, teachers would go in, look at, or there would actually be consultants that would look at the homework list. They would hand them out to teachers. Teacher would then have conversations with the students about where they were doing their homework. This is an advisory versus an academic center. So when we're talking about an advisory situation, we're not talking simply just focusing on homework. If you actually heard our conversation right now, we didn't talk about homework at all.
Sure.
And that is because it's in line with what we are talking about at the high school with standards-based assessing. So last year we spent a lot of time working on equitable grading practices. The high school has been moving in that direction for some years now. And this year and last year and this year, they have taken larger steps as a building to move into that standards-based assessing, which is focused more on how do we assess our students real time and provide evidence real time for where their learning is at. And that is based on rubrics that our staff are creating based on. The simplest way to think about it are the power verbs that you see at the beginning of the standards. So instead of focusing on necessarily an event in World War II, we are focusing on the evaluation of that event. And so with that comes a deeper requirement of understanding what that skill actually is and how to utilize that skill over the course of time. If we look at all of us as you've gone through school, many of us have developed those skills just because we've developed those skills over time. Nobody was really intentional about having those skills be something that is important for us to develop. When we talk about Yellow Jacket time, we're taking the things that we have identified, especially over these last 4 years, after we've got hit by COVID with social emotional supports, which were not something that was a major intentional focus on in academic center. It was there because there was teachers making relationships with kids. Now what we're doing is we're pulling it to the forefront, and we've identified, and that's why we have our Yellow Jacket coordinators. We're identifying what are the needs that our kids need during that time. What are the supports? How do we give our kids opportunities that a lot of our population doesn't have outside of the school day? And how do we bring that all in and offer those opportunities to our kids so that we can increase extracurricular activities, we can increase our students being involved in our building outside of just showing up to our classes every single day, that we can increase community. One of the things that we're talking about, which was a great idea that was brought up in this committee, was as we talk about traveling through those cohorts, right? You develop a very deep relationship with those kids. There is a deep connection that goes along with it. And we want those staff members to potentially shake those kids' hands as they walk across the stage after those 4 years. So think about the power that builds, that you build with that community, that you build with that family, that you build with that kid. Now, every kid in the building has somebody that they can connect to because they've got somebody that they've been meeting with over and over again, and they've got a community around them that is going to be there for them. And we also are, again, like I said, being intentional about what we're doing during that time. The EDPs are going to be tied directly to our career fairs. Whereas right now our EDPs happen and then our career fairs happen, and they happen very, very in different times during the year. So it allows us to have a continuum to look at what do our kids need, when do they need it, how can we lean into them, and how can we offer a specific time that helps them grow.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
That same wording was in my head too. It was ACO steroids. Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, perfect.
So I hope you can tell by at least the words that I'm using and the way that I'm saying it is that this is something that I am passionate about as well as the standards-based assessing portion of it. And they lead very, very well together. And through this year, we have been offering our early releases and our half days, like the half day that's coming up this Thursday. We're practicing this. We're practicing 2 90-minute blocks so that our teachers have an opportunity to work on these. And then our PLC time periods, which is our early releases, we're actually debriefing about these. So the first couple of early releases that they actually had time together as a department, and they had time together as a cross-curricular group to talk about their ideas about good practices. So this is not just a, hey, you know what, good luck next year, this is what we're doing. We're giving our kids an opportunity to live into it. We're giving our staff members an opportunity to live into it. And then this is something that we're continuing on through the year. So as we go on, the game plan is to offer a Yellow Jacket experience so that our teachers and our students know what's going on. And then offer, as we get into May, a full cycle of all 7 periods and then Yellow Jacket time as well, so that there is experience leading into that. So we have an opportunity to debrief about it and talk about the bumps in the road and the successes that we see and go into the summertime knowing what it's going to look like as we go into next year. So there's a very well thought out plan of what that looks like as we move forward for communication with everybody.
Question. What would our students be missing out academically? I mean, that's a 90-hour block, not saying it's not important to have, but academically, that could be another class, right? Are there?
Are you talking about on this Thursday?
Just no, in the new block schedule with the Yellow Jacket time.
So they're actually not missing anything. If you count the hours, there's 7 hours. And what you are, so if are you talking about trade-off, like what's the trade-off going to be? So if you look at a block period versus a 50-minute period every day, right? If you talk about processing time, if you talk about the ability to have a conversation about what we are leading into, do an experience in multiple different ways, offer our students an opportunity to then reflect on that, converse on that, peer review, develop a plan going forward. That is what is currently missing right now in our classes. So why did we look at a 90-minute period? Because in 50 minutes, we can do an experience, but we can't actually process it. So it becomes the next day that we've got to come back and hope that they remember anything or build off of that day before. Whereas in the 90 minutes, we have the opportunity to experience something, give our kids an opportunity to digest what they're actually looking at, be reflective on it. So whenever we learn something, we're always constantly going back. If we're learning it the correct way, we're always constantly going back going, okay, what should I be doing? What am I comparing this to? And then we have a chance to debrief about that. In a 90-minute period, it gives us that chance to debrief. In addition to that, a 90-minute period every other day gives our kids a chance to process. If you're talking about 55 minutes every single day, 7 periods a day, you are constantly seeing 7 classes and brand new material every single day. And now we move to the next day, we see brand new material every single day. Our goal is for them to have a deeper learning and a deeper experience with what is going on. So how do we do that? We provide more time that allows for better experiences for them to live within that experience, have enough time to debrief about it, process it so that when they come back in a couple of days, Because if it's an experiential learning opportunity, it doesn't mean that they're just going to stop thinking about it when they leave the class. If it's experiential, they're going to be constantly thinking about that. So when we come back, it allows for us to continue that experience for them because they've had a chance to invest in it themselves rather than just go, cool, my teacher gave me something, I'm out, right? Now homework becomes something that is done beforehand to get your exposure there so that when you are coming into class, I've read the articles beforehand, so then now I can talk about it. It's not, okay, now I can go home and do all these assignments because now I have 2 days to do the assignments, right? This is where the pedagogical changes come into play, is how are we front end loading the conversation so that when we're in class, we have rich, deep conversations that are going on or rich, deep experiences that are happening that continue to build as we again give them processing time over the week.
So, Mr. Wilson, the staff are getting professional development on that pedagogical change now.
Yes.
So the preparation for this type of teaching is in the works. So we're not waiting until, we hit day one of the 23-24 school year. So the prep work and all of this and the change of that paradigm, which is big, to change up on how we've been so accustomed to, new material and assignments and new material and assignments. Now going into that deeper phase of learning is the focus of a lot of the PD that's going on this year with staff.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Wade. I think you answered the question I asked, but it wasn't the right question. That was on me. So you answered the great detail on why we doing a 90-minute block schedule, which I'm completely supportive. I understand it. I guess my question was more specific to the yellow jacket time. And why not have an extra? You wrote through a lot of advantages of that yellow jacket time and the wraparound services and things that we can provide within that time. But as a traditional engineer that came up in the ranks, I would want another class in there. Why wouldn't I just throw another class in there?
Sure, go for it. Yes, absolutely.
So as a classroom teacher, one thing I experience right now with my students is, for example, NWA testing. Took 3 class periods. 3 lost instructional days.
Okay.
By the time you start the test, get students going, the starting time takes 5 to 10 minutes each time. By being able to take that out of my class and put it in yellow jacket time, now my continuity of instruction is not interrupted. And we have so many things like that could be better, that could provide us, first of all, better data. I'm not convinced an NWA test given over 3 days is as good a data as when a student gets the opportunity to sit down and complete it in one sitting. So things like that, EDPs do the same thing. Even if we're talking about real activities, I teach math. I do a lot of experiential learning, hands-on stuff. We don't get to have students work through it at their pace and have the aha moment and then be able to sit and reflect in 50 minutes. So protecting that time and not having to restart and re-engage their minds the next day by going through all the directions again and reminding them where we left off allows them to complete the learning process, which then, as Mr. Wilson said, creates a deeper understanding of what they did. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yes, it does.
So there's a trade-off of time, right? And where's that time spent? If we're already spending that time kind of all the way through the entire year and there's no intentionality behind it, how do we restructure that so that we have time that is intentional?
That is intentional. And looking at it, and again, block schedule, that I understand that was okay. That yellow jacket time, the 2 90-minute blocks per week just seemed a lot to me when I first look at it, right? Especially with us coming out the block, starting this program from a block schedule again, having these conversations and coming out, and then we're throwing these 2 90-minute sessions in. But the other side of me, the numbers say, even if you had 1 90-minute block, what are you going to do with the second 90-minute block? You can't do a class in 1 90-minute block a week. So I understand that portion of it too. So myself, just looking at the numbers, I just question whether or not the 2 90-minute blocks will be required per week. And we got enough to fill that for the whole year.
So the great thing is that it continues with the philosophy of experiential learning, right? So when we talk about it, it's not going to be filled with what a traditional academic center we would all picture in that, right? Of, hey, everybody's sitting in the room and this is what's happening. When we talk about that, I mean, we're looking at one right now, some of the ideas that we're tossing around is like one 90-minute block a month is going to be of clubs and activities, right? So now, Saravana can run a CRAC group, right? Or we have Mr. Kreinbring running a philosophy group. We have Ms. Beals running HOSA, right? And so we get all these opportunities now that people are not going outside, but now we can raise awareness of what's going on in the building. And that just becomes 190-minute month. So now we're down to 7 blocks, right? That are going to need to be utilized. And with those opportunities, with EDPs, with career fairs, with college opportunities, with opportunities for our staff members to say, hey, you know what? Anybody who's interested in forensics, we're running a crime scene tomorrow. Anybody want to come down and join, you're going to be able to sign out and come join us. We now then increase our opportunities for experiential learning that are not just contained by what happens in a specific class. And so we're looking to be very creative with that as we've had ideas all the way. I got hands all over. Go for it.
How are we giving accountability for who is where in the building at specific times? If they're going to be at HOSA one day and a crime scene another day, and as it is, I'm already hearing about students who are getting hassled in the hallways, trying to get to the band competition and those kinds of things. How is that going to be able to come together smoothly and to be able to account for students safety wise also?
So our Yellow Jack coordinators, which Jen is one of them. So we have 3 Yellow Jack coordinators that are currently working on the logistics of all of that. As what Jen said, they are starting off developing what is going to happen during those time periods. And then we will start to work on the logistics of how we will be moving people around. But there will be accountability for that through probably some use of technology. Right now, we are working on with Dan about an electronic pass system that we can keep track of all of that information as well. We've not purchased that yet, and we've not moved to that, but that is something that is on the horizon that will be utilized in this situation. But from a logistics question, I don't have a logistics answer. I don't have all the details for you yet, but that was one of the first questions that were brought up is as we are doing these things, how are we going to account for our kids moving around and be able to make sure that they are safe and where they need to be?
Okay, I'm a proponent of block scheduling, so that you won't get any argument from me with that. But how is this going to work to enhance your new grading system? I call it outcome-based learning, but you call it something else. How are these two going to work together?
So as what I stated a little bit earlier is with standards-based assessing is really focused on understanding the evidence that the student is showing regarding specific standards. So when this happens, we create what are called power standards. So there are the state standards that are numerous and many. And what we do for power standards is we shrink those down. And so what I said earlier about focusing on these power verbs, right? Analysis, perseverance for things like how do you continue to work through when you get stuck on a problem? How do you, I was in study skills today and they were talking about self-advocacy for the study skills group. So we've focused on the power verbs and what will end up happening in this time period as we're looking at is it gives us an opportunity to talk about what does this skill actually look like? And then we have an opportunity to experience that through whatever context that we're looking at. So social studies, science, English, study skills, PE, whatever that may be. We are going to work through content, experience content, but do that through the lens of evaluation or analysis or argumentation or whatever that skill may be. As they work through that, they're going to be constantly reflecting back on what that rubric says and what that skill is that they are building off of. That reflection, when they're done with it, they will have some kind of product that they have done, whether that's a discussion, through a Harkness, whether that is a written document, whether that is a project that they have created during that time. With the additional time that is there, it now gives us an opportunity for me to sit down with my partner and have a conversation about it. Hey, where did this come from? Hey, why did you do this? Where was your thinking from? We can then have an opportunity to be reflective on ourselves and go, hey, where do I think that I was here? Where do I think I was in regards to this schedule or this the standard, and how then do I move myself forward? That is what is typically missing out of a class right now. And if we think about true learning that happens when we are outside of a building, that's what we do. We look at it and we say, where's our progress? How do we need to move forward? What does that even look like? And then how do we measure that when we get there? So this gives us a longer time period to be able to continue those conversations all the way through, rather than like I said, when you look at a class, we normally have the opportunity to start something off, and that's normally about 10 to 15 minutes to get people to understand where we're going. You do a 20 to half hour time period in your class of an experience, and then you try to close it out and you run out of time, right? And there's very, very little reflection. So what does it end up being? Here's your homework for today, right? Go home and do this. But there's not any deeper understanding. There's not any connection with that expert to say, hey, talk to me about what your thinking was behind what you did. Because it's not about the answer. When we're talking about standards-based assessing, it is not about the answer. It is about how you got there and your thinking behind it, because that is truly where the power is at.
How is that gonna affect our standardized tests that our students are required to take?
So I'll give you I'll try to be short on this one. So there's two things that go along with what I've been talking about. What I hope you gather from what I've been talking about is that we are very intentional about the time that we are talking about and what we are doing in order to have our students be successful. If we get our students to go through this process and they are explaining their thinking and talking about their thinking, they are naturally going to be able to handle every situation better that they are going to face, because it's not going to be, do you understand this specific question or do you understand this specific content? It is about how you are thinking. You are all sitting in here successful because you do that all the time. We are trying to do that intentionally with our students every single day to pull that out of them, so that when they see a new situation, when they see a new situation like a test, or like they go out into real life and they're like, hey, cool, I've never been in this situation before. What do I need to do in order to handle this? They are able to do that. They're able to debate and have an adult conversation because they've done CERs, okay? They're able to develop an argument and have a legit conversation with somebody because they're able to be calm about it and have a conversation. They've gathered their resources behind that. They're able to have an argument and have a civil conversation. That's one portion of it. The second portion of it is, we are talking about intentionality. Our kids are going to see tests. They are. Our conversations that we are having in our classes is our kids are going to see tests in college. They are. They're not going to see them all the time, and tests don't drive the world, but they are going to see them. They are going to see the SAT. They are going to see the NWA. So what do? We intentionally give them that time to see what it looks like. We teach them actually what they are going to see and how they can take what our thinking is about and actually put it into a testing situation. Hey, on Tuesdays, we're going to do SAT tests, or we're going to do AP biology FRQs, free response questions, every Friday. And we're going to teach you how to do these. We're going to teach you how to think here. And we're going to teach you how to apply it to this specific situation here. So that not only are we giving them the tools that they need to be able to be successful in life and in anything that they do, we're also intentionally teaching them how to be more successful on the tests that they are going to see that are then going to give us an outcome for our classes in our school. Is that fair?
Gotcha. Yeah, that-
So I actually want to get a student's perspective. So I'm actually going to toss this to Saravana to get his perspective, not only his perspective, but from the student body's perspective.
I just want to add on what Mr. Wilson was saying. I can think of a really good example. In my AP Lit class, a normal day would be like getting a prose passage and analyzing it and then conferencing with the teacher about our analysis. But oftentimes, since the class is like 50 minutes, we only have 30 minutes to write and conference, and the teacher won't even get to every student in the class. So we'll end up coming like 1 or 2 days later and conferencing on that essay we wrote 2 days ago. And at that point, like the flow of our thoughts is kind of, it's just gone, right? Like the conferencing is kind of useless. We're basically rereading our own essay. And if we were to have like a 90-minute period and the teacher could conference with every kid the same day he wrote the essay, it'd be far better and way more beneficial for the students' understanding of what like a prose analysis is. And also for the extracurricular stuff, I do have a lot of experience in that. And I will say, like last year, I taught like an SAT prep course, and having students stay 2 hours after school to learn SAT was just not really like favor. I think that if there was a 90-minute period where I could actually teach them during the school day and not have them stay after a whole days of school, it would be like way better. And also, it'd just be easier, like, to have them do more in one day, I guess, because 90-minute blocks are just way more useful. And I feel like students would just have a better comprehension on material they're learning that way than like small 50-minute chunks. So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
So one thing that I just wanted to add is, my kid is here today just because he has a little PTSD from the whole pandemic and the block scheduling during that. Is there, I mean, there's been a lot of things. I mean, this certainly isn't virtual. There's a big difference there. And there's clearly a lot of differences. But he's very nervous. He's listening to everything you have to say and, you know, taking notes. And is there anything that you would say to those children and those families who are a little bit scarred and just a little bit anxious about that?
Yeah, I would say 90-minute blocks in the middle of COVID on a computer does not equate to good education at all. The setup that we had was the setup that we had, and we were doing the best that we could at that point, but you can't, in the middle of a pandemic when we're all trying to figure out what's going on, we're not thinking about experiential learning. We're thinking about, are my relatives okay? What's going on with my family? How do I get through something that I've never lived through before? And so everybody, the staff members as well as the students were all in the middle of a traumatic event, right? When you talk to the buildings that are in block scheduling, the buildings that I've been at in the past as well have been in block schedules. There are always going to be staff members that are phenomenal, and there are always going to be staff members that need some support. That is why we're doing what we're doing right now, so that everybody comes in with opportunities to be comfortable in the space that we are creating. Every time that we talk experiential. We don't talk about how do you do what you're doing right now in your classes in a longer period of time and fill that time. We talk about what can you do and what are you able to do in these class periods. So what we are talking about is being creative and having opportunities to do things that we have always wanted to do in our classrooms, so that we increase the one thing that we probably get the farthest away from in high school, and that's curiosity. And that's something that I bring up all the time with our staff members is traditional school has done a phenomenal job of moving away and getting our kids to not be curious about anything anymore. And if we can get our kids back to be curious and want to be in our buildings and want to be in our classes, that's what we are aiming for every time. That is the lens that we look through. That is the challenge that our staff has. Is it going to be perfect every day? It's not. Is it going to be better than what happened during COVID? Absolutely. And are we going to have continuous support for our staff members that are going to need that support? Yes. We have been talking about good teaching in our building for a long time now, and we are going to continue that on because it's not going to change. We're going to have different kids every year. We're going to have different scenarios every year, and we want our teachers to continuously grow and do better for our kids every single day. Yeah. So I would say, take a deep breath and know that when you're there, we need to hear from you. Okay? It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. I'm sorry. I wish it would be. I wish it could be, but it's not going to be. But I hope you know is that when you step into that class, if there's things that are going on, we have a culture of listening and growing. And that only happens if you are able to share with us what's happening.